Okay, so welcome everybody. So we're going to want to dedicate this class. Many of you probably see Shoshana's name on the Zoom call during this class, Shoshana Bander. So unfortunately, her father passed away on Friday, and he's going to be buried sometime today. And so we want to dedicate this class in the memory of her father, Avraham Halevi ben Yitzchak. I'm not sure if you can say that his neshama should have an aliyah until after the burial, but this will be, our learning will be in his merit for today. Okay. So last week we were looking at, paragraph 6. Where are we basically in chapter 3? So in chapter 3, Reb Hillel keeps telling us that we're going to do a meditation, itbonanut, on elokus, on godliness. And specifically that you have to start with Yichuda Tata, which is Mimale Kol Almim, and which is equivalent from what we learned to Bina, starting with the Iyun process, looking at the individual, at the world, the physical world, and seeing how it was created, Mi'ayin Yesh, and meditating on the words, as it were, that bring everything into being. And every paragraph, the last couple of paragraphs, he keeps telling us that there are going to be 3 mashalim for this process of how Hashem creates the mimale. It's etzem v'ishpashtus, that process, but then there are 3 mashalim, that there are 4 mashalim that we're going to look at. But we keep pushing it off, and we don't get to the mashalim quite yet, because he needs to create a vessel, in a sense, in our minds, to really understand what is the problem. Like, what is it that we don't understand? And so last week, he brought the question of the philosophers. Like, and he says the philosophers, but inside each one of us, there's a philosopher. There's a philosopher that says, what is a philosopher? It's somebody who works with logic and with reason, and basically with nature, with things as you can see them and feel them and touch them, and the logic of it. So he brings a couple questions that the philosopher inside of us would have about how the physical world were created, the worlds of Bia. I mean, not that all of those are physical, but they are the worlds that were created, mi'ayin liyesh. So we want to really understand what's really going on with the philosophers. Like, what is their question? So we're going to do what we normally do. We have quite a small group here this morning. I'm not sure why. But we're going to go into breakout rooms. We'll just do 2 breakout rooms. And what you're going to do is just look at paragraph 6, which we did last week, and try to understand for yourself, like on a personal level, what is the question that he's really asking? What is the question of the philosopher? So you'll be able to say it in the pshat. First of all, you just want to understand literally what is their question, and then try to understand it on a more personal level. Like, how does that relate to your internal question about, how is it possible for this world to have been created in such a way. Okay, so we're gonna go into breakout rooms. Okay, Yoni says, so then, you know what? I guess, oh, so here we are. Who just disappeared? I'm gonna.
On Miriam, I guess that little thing that just happened on the phone was probably the answer. Whatever, somebody was on another phone. I think so, because in other words, we had these incredible ideas, and then like you get a phone call, you have to do this, you have to do that, and all the practicalities, the intensity, the thickness of life with all the like, go visit her, she's gonna be out, and then in the hospital, she did drink, and she didn't, and all that other stuff, and all the stuff like the grocery store, called you, whatever it is, the car, the gasoline, is like, it's the energy is so different from that buoyant, expansive, bleedable energy of these incredible ideas that Hashem sends us first thing in the morning. So no wonder nothing gets done, because it's the contrast is it's so intense.
Well, those are the details. Those are life's details that seem to get in the way.
Yeah, and I feel like life's details, they're very heavy. The dream is very expansive. It's so light, you could like, it's incredible. And the all those details are so like, every one of them is so heavy, and all of them all at the same time is just like, I just have to go back to sleep. I can't do this project. That's what my thought.
I think an answer might be, and I'm trying to figure this out for myself, is to find someone, a chavera, a coach, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have to be a formal coach, but somebody who's on your wavelength, who you can talk to about it, who you can or write it down, and that makes it real. So that's your project and your plan that you're sticking to. And because I feel for myself, once it's just inside of me, it's a dream, it's a fantasy.
So look, I'm recording this, so I want to know what it is that, what was it in the text that prompted this discussion?
We're talking yesh ayin leyesh and yesh leyesh. Yesh leyesh.
Okay.
And that the ayin creating something from nothing to something is not conceivable by most people, or it wasn't conceivable by Paro, it wasn't conceivable by the Greek philosophers. And that so I think that Saratova was saying that, she's talking about ideas that one might get early in the morning of big things that you want to do, and then like, all right, how can I do it? Or this is impossible, or for me, it's like, who do you think you are? And then Saratova was saying that the way to approach it is not that it's your ideas, that Hashem brings this energy and ideas to you, and I'm just his helper. And how can I do this? So
you're saying that in some way, the inspiration for the idea feels like it's coming from the ayin, from a high place, but then our reality is very much yesh miyesh.
Yeah.
So then we get caught up just in the yesh miyesh, which is very limited.
Yeah. And what I was saying is that in actuality, it is yesh to yesh. That's most of the world. That's most of the people that we meet. And this is my idea, that you might be doing a great thing, and that you're humble, you have that bittul, and that really you're just Hashem's helper. But the rest of the world isn't going to see that. They're going to see, wow, like this Saratova, she's so smart and she's so skilled, and she's such a good organizer, and wow, this is really great. And that's okay, as long as that the person who's doing it understands that it's not just me, that Hashem found me and asked me to do this, and then we ask him every step of the way, please help us. And what I said was, like, I know I can't do this myself, just please send me who's going to help me, who's going to be on my team, because it is overwhelming to think that I could do all that myself. So it's a back and forth, but I think it's the reality is that Yesh is where we are, and it's where we're going to be. But we understand that that's not all there is. And also not to lose patience for the people who don't see that, because they just see what they see.
Right. Look.
And we are among the people who don't see it.
Yeah.
There are moments when we see it and there are moments when we don't.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And my instinct is, because it's based on the idea of the philosophers, they're like, they couldn't, like, how can Hashem make a world if he's bleak bull and he makes a world that's bull? And then the other question is, how can he keep it going? How does he make a chair? And then the other question is, how does he keep the chair going every day? It's two different things. So they couldn't conceive of ayin to yesh. So I'm thinking in like what Nechama said, and I'm thinking the second challenge comes in, you create a project, like you made the flyer and you did the project, wow. And then the second thing is how you're going to keep it going, especially when people start telling you you're amazing. That's the worst. That's the worst, because then you start to then you get an ego, and that like goodbye project. Once you get an ego about like,
but
yeah,
then
I did it.
you draw those people in. See, if they're going to say you're amazing, they're going to sit back and let Mrs. Queen Amazing do everything. You draw them in and say, no, we need you to be part of this. It's just like somebody who's a big bulk tzedakah, if they had nobody to receive and to give, that's a whole other thing. But we have to bring, if you don't want everything on you, you have to just help people, others see their greatness, and that they can contribute something, and they probably can contribute something that you can't do. Like I know for me, it's the technology, it's all that stuff. I really need a tech coach to do what I need to do.
Saratova, when you talk about what you're talking about is when the ego comes in, and that's a whole nother discussion. If you think about it, we have to say Shema at least twice a day, maybe 3 times. And if you look in the earlier paragraphs of this chapter, he really spoke about, what the Shema is. We didn't go into it in so much detail, but really the Shema is what connects us to the Atzmos or Ein Sof, where we are saying, our God is above, above the world of nature. We're living in the world of nature, but we are essentially connected and a channel for that which is not yesh miyesh.
Thank you. So what I see in the practical from that, thank you, because you put the limit behind what I was thinking practically. We get it. We get that idea in the morning. We feel it's like, this is Hashem's idea. He keeps sending it to me every morning, and he's saying, I chose you as the handyman to do the work. I'm like, wow, okay, right? As soon as once I start doing it, switch from yesh to yesh, forget it. That's when it messes up.
Yeah, so that's the challenge. If there wasn't a challenge, then we wouldn't need to come down to this world. Our challenge is to transform the yesh into ayin, as it were. To bring the ayin into the yesh, to transform the physical. So obviously there's resistance, because if there wasn't resistance, we wouldn't be doing the work of transformation. The thing that
so how does it look in practical?
So my question to you is, sorry?
How does it look in practical that all of a sudden I switch to yesh mayesh? Now I'm like, okay, let's see, get the, put it on your computer and yada, da, da, da. How do I know I switch from yesh to yesh when I forgot about Hashem? And then I have to go back to, wait, Hashem, this is your project. Tell me what you want me to do next.
So I tell
I don't know.
There are many things that are, that are put into avodah that is there to help us. So for example, just in this last parsha, we learned about Yitzhak, who was meditating out in the field. And they talk about how, that's the mincha prayer. So, we start with shachrit, and you bring the light in through the process of shachrit, through the many stages of shachrit. And then mincha in the middle of your day, when, you've kind of lost some of that energy, as you describe. So then you stop and you realign yourself with mincha. And that's why mincha is considered the highest prayer, actually, because it's right in the middle of the day. where you have to stop what you're doing and realign yourself with, a higher energy and say what you need to say so that you don't get lost.
I wondered if it could be on some level two different parts of the brain that we need to connect.
So look, I think that what we should do is go into the next paragraph, because really we're talking about let's first of all just collect our thoughts back and say, okay, you can see that this brought up a lot of stuff for us, but what is it that the philosophers have a problem with? And in some way, you did make it personal, because you said, okay, I also have this problem. I'm in the middle of my day and I don't feel that there's a creator. It just doesn't seem like it's part of my reality. So let's just collect our thoughts. We'll go back to what is the problem that the philosophers had. And then in this next paragraph we're going to learn, he's going to talk more about what is Yesh Yesh. And then in other paragraphs, he's then going to describe what is Yesh Ayin. Like, we don't really even know what those things are. So the more that we bring them close to our minds, so then hopefully we can have mastery over them. So let's look and see. It's good that we have a question, because a question is like a vessel, and then you can accept the light. So what were the two questions of the philosophers? What is it that they say, like, this seems impossible? Miriam, did you get it? You're muted. Miriam, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Are you asking that how would Hashem change from before creation to after creation? How can are those the questions you're referring to of the philosophers?
So he says he says clearly they have two questions. What are their two questions?
The one is how can Hashem Hashem would change from before creation to after creation. In other words, how he at one time was alone, and then he and he's not alone now, because the world and the creation is filled with him, which is multifaceted and the other question was, how can something, a physical object, be created from something that's of nothing, that it doesn't have any substance?
Right.
Are those the two questions you want then?
So those are the questions that he's asking.
Yes.
So I'm having trouble finding that in the text. So we're in paragraph 6.
Yeah.
So I know that Sartova was reading it very quickly, and I have the Hebrew English, and I just couldn't find the. I mean, I don't know. Is there one place where the questions is asked when it says the philosophers asked this question?
Yeah, very clearly.
So can you say where it is?
Yeah, here I'm sharing my screen. So
Okay.
in the beginning, I was hoping that you would have read this. The beginning of
I had it before me. Yeah.
Okay. So in the beginning, he talks about etzem v'pashtus. There are two ways in which the divine light comes into the world. One is, we're going to learn about them later. He doesn't go into them in detail. And then he says, okay, we're going to learn about that. I'm not going to go into that now. So, and then he says, and to understand all of the above, one must first preface with the question raised by the philosophers. So it's about halfway through the paragraph.
Wait a minute. 6.
ולהבין כל ענף יש להקטין קושיות
I can't find where it says and
Okay.
to understand. Wait a minute.
It's about halfway through the paragraph. Okay, so and
Okay, I got it. Yeah.
they raise two questions. The first, how can something limited be created from something unlimited? Because you would assume that the creator and the creation are similar in some way. Like, how can it be that they're completely different? And the second, if an unlimited being can create something limited, then as Miriam says, God, heaven forbid, change from before creation to after creation, because before creation he was alone. And now after creation, beings have been added, and he's not literally alone as before creation. And now he's enclothed in those creations. So how can it be? These are the two things. And then he says, I'm just going to go to the summary that I did. Then he says the philosopher's mistake is that they assume that God's actions are like man's actions. But in other words, we see our whole reality, human action is miyesh liyesh, something to something, while God's actions are mi'ayin liyesh. And then he brings an important thing, which, and I'm mentioning it because
it's in the wonder pot.
because he's going to mention it in this next paragraph. Even though Mimale Kol Almim, which is this world, the world's created mi'ayin liyesh.
You into paragraph 7 now?
No, but no, this is the end of paragraph 6. So he says, okay, we understand that we can't understand ayin to yesh because our life is yesh to yesh.
Right.
That's everything that we know. So now he adds something. Even though Mimale Kol Almim is enlivened by way of koach hapoel benifal, the power of the creator, or the power of the activator in the activated, which is Hashem's name, Adonai or Elohim. It is not similar to when a person is the power of the activator in the physical world, because a person creates yesh miyesh, miyesh liyesh, and Hashem creates mi'ayin liyesh. Okay, so it's really just saying the same thing, that even the idea of koach hapoel benifal, like Hashem being enclothed in something, like in the beings. That's why that was one of their questions. How is that possible? So even that we can't understand, because when I'm engaged in an activity, it's yesh miyesh. But when Hashem is engaged, we're going to learn that it's different from that. The power of the activator in the activated is going to be different from the way it is with a human being. And that's what we're going to be learning about in this next paragraph. So, yeah. So it's good that, that you took, it seems to me that in your discussions, you then took it into the frustration of during the day that we just get so lost in our yesh to yesh reality, and we lose that sense of Hashem. And that really personalizes the philosopher's questions, because it means that we really have this struggle in a personal way. Even though we might not call ourselves philosophers, we still feel like how is this world, like, where is Hashem in this world when I just get lost in all the details of physicality? And so this is what he's going to address slowly, to help us maybe get closer to an understanding of what is yesh miyesh and then what is yesh mi'ayin, so that we can connect to them both. So now, because Mila is not here, she actually made a recording of her reading and translating this next paragraph. And I'm going to play it for you. I hope that you can hear it. So I'm going to start playing and just want to make sure that you can see it and you can hear it. And let's see how this goes. Otherwise, I'll go through it. We'll just do the text together. So let me see how to do this. Let's see, we are recording. Okay. So I just need you to give me some indication that that you can hear this. Here we go.
Good morning, everybody. I'm not going to be live today. I'm recording this session with you on the 7th paragraph of Shara Yichud because I'm going to be driving my son to the airport, and unfortunately, I can't be present during the class. We also heard very sad news about Shoshana's father, and I really would love to dedicate this class for his full Aliyas Neshama, Yitzchak ben Abraham Alevi. May he have an ultimate Aliyah, which is full revelation of his Neshama here, Beguf, with Mashiach Tzidkenu. May this happen speedily now, and may we all join all the neshamas going to be descending into the body in a complete redemption. So we're gonna begin. I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna go to our chart that I shared recently, just to sum up. What we spoke about the two levels, two modes of divine unity. And, this is pretty much, the mode to which world this corresponds, which name of Hashem, what type of unity we're talking, and what type of light. So as we see over here, this is Sof Kol Almin. And when it gets revealed in two ways. One way is Helam V'Gilui, and another way, Etzem V'Ispashtos. Now, when it gets revealed in Helam V'Gilui, that corresponds mainly to the world of Atzilus. The name of Hashem is Yud Kei Vav Kei. This is Yehuda Ilah, and we're talking about Sof Kol Almin. Now, when we're talking about the light of Hashem revealing itself in Etzem V'Ispashtos, this is primarily takes place in Bria, Yitziri, and Asiya. These are the names of Hashem, Elokim, and Adnai. This refers to Yehuda Tata, and this is Mamalik Kol Almin. So just to keep this in mind, now, do we really understand fully what this means? No, we don't. And it will take time for us to get familiar with the language and understand, but at least this type of clarity is important. So this way, whenever we are talking about Atzilus, for example, right, we already know all the parallel things that are happening in the world of Atzilus. That it's Halam V'Gilui, that it's Shem Havaya, that it's Yehuda Ilah, and this is Sof Kol Almin. So all that is going to bring up all that. Anyway, we're going to go back to our paragraph 7. And we're going to move slowly with the concept, right? V'lahavin inyan zeh, yesh lahagdim hefresh ben b'chinas shefa leb'chinas or. So now we're going a little bit deeper into the text. And to understand this concept, which we discussed a few seconds ago, right, we must first explain the difference between category of Shefa and the category of light, right? Something which is called a flow and the category of light, okay? And when we'll understand this, it will be much easier for us to understand these two modes, Etzem v'Spashtus and Helam v'Gilui. Ki b'chinas Shefa hu b'chinas hamshacha miyesh leyesh. For Shefa represents the drawing down, right? The manifestations of one existing entity into another, right? It's miyesh leyesh. Shefa comes to the world, the flow comes from yesh to yesh. B'chinas miyesh leyesh, yesh gam ken beisofanim. Ha'alef miyesh leyesh gashmi, v'habes miyesh yesh ruchni. So now, we're going even more specific. In yesh v'yesh, there are two types. One is gashmi, and one is ruchni. Okay, so we're looking very, very close into yesh miyesh. What does this mean? Hine miyesh leyesh gashmi, hu kmo hanatina mi asher la'ani, o kamayim sheyardi mi makom la'makom. Right, so the physical example of yesh leyesh is like a rich man is giving a poor man, or like water descending from one place to another. What actually happens? Shemahut hashefa nimshach min hamashpia el hamekabel, o mimakom ze lemakom acher. Because the whole, in such a case, the whole shefa itself is physically being moved from the mashpia to the mekabel, right? In this case, is the rich man versus the poor man, or from one place to another, which is in the case of water. The water actually physically is being moved from one place to another place. Shemahut hashefa nimshach min hamashpia el hamekabel o mimakom lemakom acher. כי בזה נעשה שינוי גמור למשפיע, או במקום שהיה השפע תחילה. Now, what ends up happening that because of this flow, there is a change, a complete change from the mashpia, right, that goes from one place, or, the change by the mashpia, or in the place where the shefa was in the beginning. Okay, like from the mashpia, it's actually, I'm giving this money to a poor man. Now I have that amount less. And when we're talking about the flow of water, now there's no longer water in that place, and now it's moving. So now we don't see that shefa is no longer there. It was either given to the mekabel or drawn to another place. Okay, so that's clear. That's yesh leyesh gashmi. That's, we primarily deal with that, and we see that in the world all the time, right? There is this limitation of yesh leyesh gashmi in shefa, and we see that. Ki achshav ein hashefa klal sham ki natna lamakom o nimshach lamakom acher. Okay, we read it. Ach ba'ofen habeis, but the second type, Shuhu mi yesh leyesh ruchni. It's yesh leyesh ruchni. Like the teacher was giving over a seichel, an intellect, an idea to his student. She'eino noten lo mahut sichlo, rak shemashpia, loi he'er ba'alma mi'atzmi sichlo. Right? The teacher does not give him the actual substance of his intellect. Right? He doesn't take a piece of his brain and install that in the student. So what does he do? But rather he gives over to him the mere illuminations from the essence of his intellect, right? Is something there, right? That's more ruchni, right? It's, what is an idea? When he enclothes the idea in his mouth, in his speech, in his words, and he's giving it over to his students, what exactly happens during that time? Is it a piece of his brain goes out? No, it's an illumination. It's a certain light that he's sharing with them. But and with this illumination, right, he enlightens the student's mind so that he can understand the concept on his own through the power of his own intellect. right? Because if a person doesn't have intellect for whatever reason, right, or his intellect it's in a very low functioning level, he won't be able to grasp it, right? So the whole point is that the hashpa'ah illuminates a concept. So it enlightens the student's mind so he can understand it with his own power of intellect. So when we understand something, it's not a hashpa'ah giving us anything. Hashpa'ah only illuminates for us, and we grasp it with our own mind. Similarly to when light from the candle is brought into the dark room, it enables the power of the sight in the eye to find what was already there. And this is really, really beautiful, because teacher doesn't add anything to the student. He only illuminates, and now the student is capable to use the same powers that he always had to understand this concept, because it's a premise that we all have everything within us. Nobody adds anything and nobody takes away anything from us. Okay, right? And this is the meaning, which means it enlightens the eyes of the wise in halacha. What do you mean enlightens the eyes of the eye? Because before a person was in a dark room. Now a teacher illuminated that dark room, but now we're capable of understanding what we always had in that room. And if so, in this yesh leyesh shefa exchange, right? Nothing is less by the teacher now, right? It's not like he took a piece of his brain and now he no longer has access to that piece of brain, right? It's he illuminated. It's only an illumination that took place, that now the student sees it in himself. So then what is it? And therefore there's no complete change here. That even though the teacher gives over an idea, seichel, to the student, nothing is missing in him. Okay, but nevertheless, there's a slight change. Something is happening there with the mashpia. What is it? Nevertheless, because of the time he's giving over an idea to the student, his intellect must be enclosed in this shefa he's giving over. So there's a limitation, meaning he is caught up in the process. While he's giving, he's caught up in that process. And he cannot be engaged at the same time of the action in another place. Okay, so it's a meaning he's being caught up in the process of giving over, right? For example, he cannot, I don't know, go take a horseback riding during that time that he actually giving over. So there is a limitation of what's happening. Similarly, when the power of action, right, is enclosed in one particular activity, it cannot be enclosed simultaneously in another activity. For example, if I'm jumping rope right now, or right now I'm speaking and sitting here giving over this particular class, I cannot be walking around and playing tennis at the same time, meaning my body has a particular limitation. It's true that tenuah could be all kinds of things. I could do in tenuah whatever I want. I could raise my hands up, down, to the side. I could ride. I could swim. I could do many different things, right? But right now, in this particular moment, when I'm engaged in one pa'ula, I cannot be engaged simultaneously in another pa'ula. This is the limitation, okay? Like likewise, the intellect that is enclosed in one activity cannot be enclosed right? At the same time, be engaged in something another, in another activity. And therefore, it's called miyesh liyesh, meaning it's not the same as yesh miyesh gashmi, because yesh miyesh gashmi, this piece of money or piece of water or whatever that item is, when it moved from one place to another or from one owner to another owner, it's actually chaser. Okay, but therefore it's called yesh miyesh ruchni. So there is a limitation there. Okay, but nothing is actually missing from the fountain, right? If somebody's sharing an idea, now another person knows that idea, but at the same time, at that moment, he only can be engaged in that process. Okay, therefore it's called still yesh miyesh. Sheyesh b'hem shinui mikodem hashefa, right? And therefore there is a change from before the influence. Why? Because before the influence, she'eina nitfus u'melubash b'shum davar, ke'la esa hashpa'ah she'nitfus u'melubash b'hashpa'ah zois shemashpia. Right, that because there is no change before the influence, when it is not engaged, no, because there is a change, right, before the influence. What's the change? When it is not engaged and enclosed in anything. And during the influence, it becomes engaged and enclosed in that particular act of influencing. Okay, so there's a limitation. Therefore, it's still considered to be yesh miyesh, but it's ruchni. However, after the influence is completed, the mashpia returns to himself as before. Okay? Right? But in the physical yesh liyesh, even after the act, right? Gam achar hashpa'ah yesh shinui, shu chisaron hashefa etzel mashpia. Right? But miyesh liyesh gashmi, even after the act, the change remains, which is the lack of the shefa in the mashpia. Okay, so a rich man had $100. Now is shared with a poor man. It's no longer. That's it. It's ended. But it's not like that when a person shares a more ruchnistic thing, which is the seichel, right? So that's why it's still yesh miyesh, but a person gets caught up in the process. But then when he returns to himself, he's no longer caught up. Right? He could do something else. He could give a different seichel to his different talmid. Right? For example, let's imagine, I have two talmidim in front of me. One needs Chassidus, the other one needs to understand, I don't know, additions. Right? When I'm explaining additions to one of my students, I cannot at the same time explain Chassidus to another. What happens is I finish my shefa with addition, then I come back to myself, and then I could be mashpia another seichel to my other talmid. Okay, now that's the limitation. But once I give $100 to another person, that $100 doesn't come back to me. I'm no longer able to give the same $100 to that person. I would have to reach out for my other $100 to give. Okay, והטעם לזה הוא מחמס שהמשפיע עם המקבל הוא בערך זה לזה, right? The reason for this, okay, that a mashpia and the makabel are compatible to each other. Right? Although the teacher's intellect is greater than the student's, but both of them are limited intellects. So there is some kind of compatibility there. So now he's actually saying something profound. He's like, why is that when there is shefa, whether it's gashmi or whether it's ruchni, right, has that limitation? Why is it? It's because they are similar to each other. They both are limited. And because of that limitation, the process of shefa itself already has its limitations. Whether it's going to be the limitations of transferring the gashmi, the item, or it's going to have the limitations of being caught up in the process. Chen makor ha'pa'ula im ha'pa'ula ha'pratis shneihem ha'mugbalim. And likewise, the source of the activity and the specific activity are both limited. So because they are in the essence are limited, okay, therefore the interaction is going to be in a limited way as well. And likewise, the intellect and the action of teaching are both creations, and therefore they are limited. And therefore, since the mashpia is limited, by definition, it cannot be simultaneously engaged in two places. Okay, ולכן יש בו שינוי מקודם השפעה, שאינו נתפס בהשפעה לעץ ההשפעה שנתפס בהשפעה. Okay, and, right, there is a change in him before influencing. He's not engaged with influencing. And during the time of influencing, he's engaged in the process of influencing. What does this mean? ולכן יש בו שינוי. Therefore, he has a change in him from before the Shefa. What's the change in him? That he cannot be engaged at the same time in another Shefa. He has that limitation. And consecutively, he cannot be engaged in another Shefa. Okay, Vadal, and it should be enough to understand. So now, what do we have in our hand? In our hands, we have that there is two things. There is a Shefa, and then there's Ohr. Okay, what does this mean, Shefa and Ohr? The way Hashem interacts with us, remember we also had a question of philosophers, right? That, like, how can Hashem create the worlds? The way he creates them. And then he says that, they're comparing it, miyesh liyesh. They're comparing it, the creation of Hashem, the way we create. And that's why they have these difficulties. Okay. So what's other difficulties? One second. The difficulties is that it's hard for them to understand how Hashem creates the world. Okay, because they look at it through their own prism of understanding. And this is where they make a mistake. And in order for us to understand what type of mistake they're making, okay, so we're going to take a little bit shift to understand that there is Ohr, and then there is Shefa. So he doesn't explain what Ohr is, but he explains what Shefa is. The Shefa is mi yesh leyesh gashmi, or yesh leyesh ruchni. But Shefa is always yesh mi yesh. Since yesh has a limitation, therefore the Shefa that we engage in also has a limitation. What's the limitation of Shefa? Shefa Gashmi has a limitation. I have money. I have a certain amount of money. And when I give this money to somebody else, I no longer have this money. And the same thing is with water. When water flows, it's no longer up where it was, and now it's in another place. Is this limitation? Okay, so now even with the teacher and mashpia and mekabel, there's also that limitation. What is it? Although I don't take a piece of my brain,
Sorry, it seems to have gotten stuck there. Were you able to hear everything up until then? It was very clear. Let me see if I can get it to continue. No, it seems to be stuck. I don't know why. Okay. But I think that it was pretty clear there what Mila was sharing. So let's just take a few minutes. I mean, it doesn't seem like such a difficult paragraph. He's really describing these two aspects of Yesh Yesh. But if we want to really connect it back to the questions of the philosophers, then we'll really understand what he's saying and why he's talking about this Yesh Yesh. So the Yesh Yesh Gashmi is very clear. You know, I have water in this cup and I put it in that cup, and then, you know, there's a lack. A physical object goes from one place to another. And so there's a change. We understand that. But then the second part is something that I think is more the chidush, is trying to answer the question, the second question of the philosophers, which is more subtle. So what was the second question of the philosophers? Let's just have a look at it in detail so that we get it exactly, because he keeps asking in a lot of detail. Okay, so I'm going to share it here just from the summary that I made. So the first question of the philosophers was, okay, how can something limited be created from something unlimited? And I don't know if he really dealt with that. But the second question is, if Hashem did create the world, then he would change from before creation to after creation. Before he was alone, and now creations have been added, so he's not alone. And before he was not enclothed in anything, and now he's enclothed in created beings. So do you get from that question? They're really saying, look, I don't understand. Hashem must have changed. Why? Because, let's see, because they're looking at the Yesh, Yesh, Ruchni. If we look at this example of, you know, when I'm giving right now, you know, I'm talking to you, and it's not like I'm not literally taking something physical and giving it over to you, but while I'm talking to you, there's a limitation because I'm a Yesh and because the situation is a Yesh. And so while I'm here, I can't be somewhere else. So the way that I understand it, that's the question they're asking. If Hashem is creating the world, even if he's creating the world, you know, even if it were constant creation, he's engaged in the world, just like I'm engaged right now. So I can't be somewhere else. So there's a change. They're suggesting there's a change in Hashem. Just in this, you know, they're not asking the most basic question of Yesh Yesh Gashmi. It's more sophisticated. It's Yesh Yesh Ruchni. They're saying how we don't understand how God can be enclothed in the world and remain unlimited, because there's a limitation. Just like when we give over something, okay, we might be giving over like Shefa, it's not physical Shefa, but at the time that we're engaged, we can't be somewhere else. So there is some kind of a change in us, because when I'm engaged, okay, so maybe I return to myself afterwards. I didn't give something away from, like I'm not lacking something physical. And so what we have to understand, I think, is that it's a deep question. It's not just like, oh, the question of the philosophers, like, how stupid are they? No, it's a very deep question. And if we understand Yesh Yesh Ruchni in this world, we really understand what is that question. Like, how can Hashem be creating this world and be enlivening this world and not change? because we don't have a model for that. Our model is, even the most sophisticated model we have, is that while I'm engaged in giving over my intellect, which is something like that's not tangible, it still means that there's a change in me. Not the same way there's a change if I give $100 when I don't have that $100 anymore. It's not like I don't have the intellect anymore. No, I still have it, but there's still an aspect of limitation that is involved. So he's really building the question. So it maybe, it's like, in a way, he's saying you should have this question. This should be something that you should understand, that maybe even unconsciously we have this question and we just kind of skip over it and say, okay, but we don't really understand. How is it possible for Hashem, who is infinite, to create something that's finite? And how is it possible that once he creates the world, if he can create the world in that way, how is it possible that he doesn't change? We have no model for that. Our most sophisticated model is Yesh Yesh Ruchni, which is what he described in a lot of detail. And so now we're just holding this question. And in the next paragraph, Reb Hillel is going to go deeper and explain that what we described now, the Yesh to Yesh, Gashmi and Ruchni, is what we call Shefa. And there's a different mode, which is called light, or. And light functions in a different way. And that's what, and the light is going to function Mi'ayin Liyesh. And he's going to explain to us what that is. And try and bring it close to our minds, because our minds don't have a model for that. We just don't. Okay, so let's just open it up for a few minutes and see questions, insights, anything.
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Years ago, it just made me think of this. And it's like, for me, it's an example. I was listening to an Rabbi Alon Anava, telling his story, and he said something about his wife that I can't remember exactly, but I remember the idea was that she realized that when she is davening to Hashem, Hashem is listening to her, like waiting to hear her prayers, and he's there exclusively for her. And when I heard that, I suddenly thought, that's like such a crazy idea, because all of us are davening, like thousands, millions, I don't know, like not just Jews, we're all talking to Hashem at the same time, and Hashem is tuning into each of us, like individually. And it's that's like, I don't know, that to me is like a good illustration of it.
Right. So how can that be, that Hashem can be fully engaged with one person and also fully engaged with, millions of people? Yeah. So that is our question. And our brain cannot contain the answer yet.
Well, when I daven, like sometimes I'll have, like, I'll be davening about something, and something, like recently, something hectic was going on in our community, and I was asking Hashem about something, and then I thought, well, there's so much going on over here. Can Hashem be listening to me as well? And I realized, yes, but yeah, it is like, it's like a mind-blowing idea, but it's also because that's Hashem.
Right. So, you know, basically that's usually what we do is we just say, okay, that's Hashem. So in this chapter, Reb Hillel is going to bring that's Hashem, you know, like that part of our brain that can't understand it. He's going to try to explain it to us. And we're going to try and understand something that is really not understandable in a way for us because we don't have an example of it. Or so far, we don't think we have an example of it in this world, in our reality. I mean, what it brought up for me is, you know, it's not exactly the same thing, but often when I'm teaching, I talk about a kind of giving where you don't lose something. And the only example of that is if I have a candle that's got a flame and you bring a candle, then you take some of the fire from my candle, I don't have less fire. It just multiplies. You get more. That's really like it's a yesh to yesh, but it's a place where there's no lack. It defies, it's the only substance, from what I understand, that has that quality. And maybe that's basically talking about the quality of light. We'll see that fire has a different quality to many other things. Okay. Anybody
I think that you know, in spiritual terms, like even in the world, like some people call it karma, but there's a concept that like if you're giving tzedakah, you're not losing, you're gaining. And so we hear all kinds of stories about how the wheel of fortune changes and how a rich person then became a poor person. So although we don't necessarily see it in the ruchniistic realm, the good that we give comes back to us. So, and it's not always apparent.
Right. So I was also thinking about that regarding the example he gives of a rich man and a poor man. But, you know, on the level of pshat, a rich man gives money to a poor man and the rich man has less.
For now, for right now.
Right, exactly. So we're
And
not
because Hashem is not limited to time, then, you know, maybe there's no loss in that realm.
right. So here we're talking about, you know, how things look, you know, in Gashmiut. I mean, just that's why I guess maybe you also brought that second example of, you know, I have a cup of water and I give you half of the water in my cup into your cup. Now I have half a cup. There's no spiritual law that says, no, I mean, I guess you could start saying, okay, there's a spiritual law because I'm giving and et cetera, et cetera. But just on a pshat level, now I have less water in my cup because I gave you. That's yesh to yesh gashmi. Now, you know, if you want to start talking about spiritual laws, that's something else. But we're not really going there here. We're looking at, you know, what we can see and the kind of, that's why he says the philosophers. A philosopher is looking at the physical laws and even the details of the physical laws and logic and reason. So the philosopher can go into the realm of, okay, you know, I'm not giving you something physical, I'm giving you something that's not so tangible, like a teaching, like an idea. And even then, like that's the highest level I can go to in the physical world of trying to understand something that is, you know, I give it over and I still have it. Like I don't lose my intellect by teaching, you know, by speaking to somebody and sharing it with them. I don't, but there is still that limitation of I'm engaged at that moment. So, yeah. Anybody else? Sarah, Miriam? No. Sarah, you are muted.
A question that maybe I could find the answer myself. I remember that Mila said, or you said, that there are 18 minutes for a review. Where would I find that?
Oh, sorry. I don't think it's in chapter 3. I don't think Mila went as far as chapter 3.
Okay.
It is a pity just to follow to have the reading and translation and explaining.
But up to chapter 3, it is in the Google Drive. There is a link to it.
So I'm not sure that it went into chapter 3. It was the whole of chapter 1 and maybe part of chapter 2. I don't think it was chapter 3.
Okay,
but
sure.
There's a link to it if you want to check like the last recording.
Right.
There's a link to it on the Google Drive in chapter 1.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
It would be nice to have that, but I don't think that we're going to be able to make that available. What Mila has done, Sarah, is that if you can find the recording on the video, we don't make, she just reads it from beginning to end with the explanation, with no interruptions. So if you can find it on the recordings, you don't have to watch the whole recording. You can just go to that place in the video recording. You can find, you can find fairly easily. Also, what we've been doing for this chapter 3 is the first half an hour, which is not on the recording, is breakout groups, because we review the previous chapters. So the recordings are shortened. I think you should be able to find it. But once you see Mila, you'll see the text and Mila will be talking about it. It's kind of like that 18 minutes. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So if that's it, we'll keep it short this week. And next week, it's really exciting. It's important. I think like what he's trying to do is he's trying to build the question inside of us so that when we understand the difference between Shefa and Ohr, it will come to answer a question. But in a way, I find this a lot, that as an adult, we skip over these questions. I think for myself, because we feel like, well, there's no answer to it. So we just kind of accept it, kind of like Yoni said, well, that's just Hashem. But actually, in Judaism, you see the Seder Stalshlut is so detailed that actually there is an answer to all of these things in Chassidus and in Kabbalah. It's just that we haven't been taught it. So now we're going to open our minds, broaden our minds, and we're going to learn, like, wow, there's actually, like, with the logic of our limited minds, we're going to be able to understand this Yesh Mi'ayin, the way that light works, or not just Shefa, not just this Yesh Mi'yesh, which is our experience. So I'm looking forward to it. And I hope that now you have the question, like it's something that you want to know, right? Because really we just put it aside. Okay, so we just have to accept it. No, we don't have to accept it. We're gonna find out how it works. B'ezrat Hashem. Okay, so we'll see you next week. B'ezrat Hashem. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Naria.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And Mila will be back next week. B'ezrat Hashem.
Thank you.